The laughter echoed through the mansion, loud enough to drown the sound of a breaking heart. Alisha stood trembling, shards of glass at her feet, as Rose's voice sliced through the air. "Know your place, girl. You're nothing but a servant." But this time, she didn't lower her eyes. With tears burning down her cheeks, she looked straight at them and whispered, "I will take everything from you." For a second, silence. Then, laughter, cruel and careless. What none of them knew was that their empire was already cracking. And before the next sunrise, the maid they mocked would become the name they'd all learned to fear. Now watch what happened next. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. The evening sky over Chicago burned with streaks of orange and gold, casting its glow through the towering glass windows of Williams and Moore Enterprises. Inside, Edmund Williams sat behind his mahogany desk, reviewing a report that reflected everything he had built from the ground up. His company was thriving, contracts secured, expansions underway, hundreds of workers whose livelihoods depended on his vision. For Edmund, this wasn't just a business, it was a dream realized through sweat, sacrifice, and faith. Across from him stood John Moore, his business partner and supposed friend of 20 years. To the world, they were a symbol of unity, two men from different worlds who had defied odds to build an empire. Edmund, the black visionary with unshakable integrity. John, the white financier with charm and connections. Together, they had built a bridge between hope and success. Or so Edmund believed. But behind John's pleasant smile was a heart curdled by jealousy. Every article praised Edmund's genius. Every client wanted his presence in the room. And every time Edmund spoke with his natural authority, John felt smaller, less important. That envy soon found a partner in darkness, his wife Rose. Rose Moore had grown tired of hearing her husband live in Edmund's shadow. "You built that man," she whispered one night as she poured him a drink. "Without your name, without your money, he'd still be selling ideas in cheap suits. And now look, people talk about him as if you were just his employee." John clenched his jaw. Her words planted a seed that would grow into betrayal. Over the following months, quiet meetings began, lawyers invited to dinner, accountants summoned late into the night. Rose oversaw everything with cold precision. They forged documents, altered share records, and transferred ownership rights under Edmund's trusting nose. Whenever Edmund signed routine papers, believing them to be for expansions or audits, they were actually signatures stripping him of power. Edmund never suspected a thing. His heart was too pure, his trust too genuine. He believed loyalty meant something. He treated John like a brother, attending his children's birthdays, visiting when Rose was ill, covering for his mistakes when business deals faltered. But loyalty is a blade with two edges, and Edmund would soon feel its sharpest cut. The first tremor of betrayal came quietly. One morning, his assistant handed him a legal notice regarding the sale of company assets, documents he never approved. Confused, Edmund rushed to John's office, only to find him absent. When he demanded explanations from their legal team, they stammered and avoided his eyes. Hours later, he was called to an emergency board meeting. There, under the sterile glow of the conference lights, sat John Moore at the head of the table, his chair. "Edmund," John began, pretending calm, "I think it's time we discuss a leadership transition. The board has voted for a new direction." Edmund laughed in disbelief. "What are you talking about? This is our company." John slid a folder across the table. Inside were signatures, his own, forged and manipulated, transferring majority ownership to John. Beneath them were bank statements, transfers, and letters suggesting Edmund had voluntarily stepped down due to health reasons. The room fell silent as Edmund's eyes scanned the betrayal inked in black and white. His heart pounded violently in his chest. You did this?" he whispered, looking up at the man he had once trusted more than a brother. John avoided his gaze. Rose, standing by the door in a designer suit, smirked faintly. "Don't look so surprised, Edmund," she said softly. "It's business. You should have read the fine print." The words sliced deeper than any knife. Edmund's breath came shallow. His hands trembled as the folder slipped from his fingers. Memories flashed before him, long nights drafting business plans with John, laughter over late coffee, promises of fairness and brotherhood. It all crumbled in a single moment. He stumbled back, clutching his chest as a sharp pain tore through him. "You were my friend," he gasped. John finally looked up, but his face held no remorse, only discomfort, as though watching something inevitable unfold. "You made this company too much about yourself," he muttered. "It's time someone else ran it properly." Rose's perfume filled the air as she leaned closer. "Don't worry, Edmund," she whispered. "We'll take care of everything, including little Alisha." Her words struck him harder than the pain in his chest. His daughter. His only child. He tried to speak, to defend her future, but the room blurred. The sound of his heartbeat drowned everything else. Papers fluttered to the floor as his knees buckled. "Edmund!" someone shouted, but it was too late. As he collapsed, gasping for air, his final thoughts were of Alisha, her bright eyes, her innocent laughter, her small hand gripping his finger the day she was born. He had promised to protect her, to give her a life he never had. But now, all he could whisper was her name, Alisha. The light in his eyes dimmed. Rose exhaled in relief. John loosened his tie, staring at the lifeless man who had once been his friend. "Clean this up," Rose said coldly. "We can't afford a scandal." Outside, the city lights continued to glow, unaware that a good man's dream had just died behind those office walls. And somewhere across town, a little girl slept peacefully, not knowing that when morning came, her world would never be the same again. The Moore mansion was the kind of place that looked beautiful only from the outside. Grand columns, glittering chandeliers, and gardens so perfectly trimmed they could have been drawn by hand. But for Alisha, it was a gilded prison. She was barely 6 years old when John Moore carried her through those towering doors. He had wrapped her in a white blanket, his voice smooth and compassionate as he spoke to the neighbors who watched from afar. "Poor Edmund's daughter," he said solemnly. "We'll raise her as our own." People called him a saint for taking in the orphan child of his late business partner. They didn't know that behind those polished doors, kindness had no home. At first, the mansion felt magical to Alisha. She'd never seen ceilings so high or carpets so soft. She wandered the halls clutching the small teddy bear that had belonged to her father, believing she was safe. But that illusion shattered the first time she called Rose Mama. Rose's eyes, sharp as glass, froze her mid-sentence. "Don't ever call me that again," she said. "You're not my daughter, and you do well to remember your place." That place, as Alisha quickly learned, was in the shadows. By the time she was 10, she was cleaning silverware instead of playing with dolls. She woke before dawn, her small hands scrubbing marble floors until her fingers burned. Her breakfast was whatever scraps the family left behind, and her room, a small windowless attic, smelled of dust and forgotten things. The Moore family's daughter, Amanda, grew up the same age as Alisha but lived like a princess. Amanda wore silk dresses and diamond hairpins. Alisha wore faded aprons and hand-me-downs. Every time Amanda broke something, a vase, a dish, even a mirror, Alisha took the blame. "You're lucky we let you stay here," Rose would sneer. "You'd be nothing without us." John, once her father's business partner, pretended not to see the cruelty. He would pat her head now and then, saying, "Be grateful, Alisha. We're giving you a roof over your head." His smile was the kind that never reached his eyes. The years crawled forward like a shadowed dawn. The little girl who once dreamed of fairy tales became the young woman who believed she was cursed. Every reflection she saw, whether in polished floors or bathroom mirrors, seemed to whisper the same lie: "You don't belong." Still, something inside her refused to die. At night, when the mansion slept, Alisha would sneak into the storage room beneath the staircase. There, buried beneath a dusty box of old clothes, she kept her secret, an old leather-bound diary wrapped in a torn cloth. Her father's diary. She'd found it one rainy afternoon, cleaning the attic. A loose floorboard had creaked under her broom, and beneath it, she discovered the treasure that would become her lifeline. Inside were pages filled with her father's handwriting, steady, elegant, and full of warmth. Most entries were smudged or faded, but a few words shone clear: "Trust once broken is never the same." And another: "If anything happens to me, my daughter must know the truth." Those words became her prayer. She couldn't understand all of it yet: business contracts, names of companies, strange signatures, but she clung to the feeling that somewhere between those pages lay the story of who she truly was. Sometimes she'd read them by candlelight, tears blurring the ink. She'd whisper, "Daddy, if you're watching, tell me who I am." And though the room stayed silent, she always felt a strange calm, as if his spirit lingered beside her. But in the daytime, that peace vanished. Rose made sure of it. "Why are you so slow, Alisha?" Rose barked one morning as the girl set the table for dinner. "If you want to eat like us, you should learn to move like us." Amanda giggled, tossing a piece of bread toward her. "She'll never be one of us, Mother. Look at her, she doesn't even look like she belongs in this house." The laughter stung more than the bread that hit her arm. Alisha lowered her eyes, whispering a soft "yes, ma'am." Every insult became a thread woven into her skin, tightening with each passing year. At 16, she stopped hoping they would ever treat her differently. The other maids called her the quiet one, because she rarely spoke. But silence became her weapon. She listened. She observed. She remembered. Every cruel word, every secret conversation between John and Rose, every document she saw on the study desk. She stored them in her mind like pieces of a puzzle she didn't yet know how to solve. One day, as she was dusting John's office, she paused at the framed photograph on the wall, A&M Holdings. Her father's name wasn't there. It read simply More Industries. A strange ache stirred inside her. Something about that name felt wrong. She looked closer at an old group photo below it. Her father was in it, smiling, shaking hands with John. Beneath the frame, someone had scribbled out Edmund's name with black ink. She froze. The truth was staring her in the face, but fear made her step back. What if asking questions got her thrown out? What if she really was just a servant and not the daughter of the man in that photo? That night, she couldn't sleep. Rain battered the roof above her tiny attic, and the wind whistled through the cracks like a ghost calling her name. She reached under her bed for the diary and held it to her chest. Flipping through the pages, she found a line she hadn't noticed before, half faded at the corner of the paper. "If you ever doubt who you are, look for the truth beneath the lies." She didn't yet understand it, but those words planted something inside her, a quiet rebellion, the beginning of awakening. By 20, Alisha had grown into a young woman of grace and quiet strength. The servants whispered that she carried herself with a dignity the Moors couldn't destroy. Even Amanda noticed the shift, sensing a confidence that unnerved her. "Don't forget, you're still just the help," Amanda would remind her with a sneer. But Alisha no longer bowed her head as easily. Every night she reread the diary, every word a spark in the darkness. She didn't know yet that those pages held more than her father's memories. They held his revenge, his truth, and her destiny. For now, she remained the maid who never knew who she truly was. But deep within her chest, behind the silence and obedience, something fierce was stirring. Something the Moors had long buried was beginning to awaken. The night was unusually quiet. A slow rain tapped against the roof of the old servants' quarters, and Alisha sat by the small window, the candlelight trembling beside her like a secret waiting to be told. She had read her father's diary so many times that some pages were beginning to tear at the edges. But that night, something made her open it again. Maybe it was the storm. Maybe it was the emptiness inside her chest that refused to fade. The faint smell of old paper filled the room as she turned each fragile page, tracing her father's handwriting with trembling fingers. His words always gave her strength, like whispers from a world she barely remembered. But as she flipped through the back cover, her nail caught on something, an uneven fold in the leather binding. She frowned, lifting the flap slightly. Something was hidden inside. Heart pounding, she slipped her fingers into the crevice and pulled out a small, sealed envelope, aged, yellowed, and stamped with her father's initials, E.W. Alisha froze. The world around her seemed to go silent, even the rain. Her breath came in shallow waves. For years she had believed the diary was all that remained of him. But now, holding that envelope felt like holding a heartbeat, a pulse from the past refusing to die. She broke the seal gently. Inside were several documents, stock certificates, company letters, and a small cassette tape wrapped in wax paper. Her eyes darted across the words, E&M Holdings, shareholder rights, ownership agreements. Her father's name, Edmund Williams, was printed clearly beside another, John Moore. Her throat tightened. One of the letters was written in her father's hand. The ink had faded, but the words carried the same authority that once commanded boardrooms and hearts alike. "If you're reading this, my little one, it means they took everything from us. But not your right to it. They can steal a name, but they can't steal blood. The empire is yours, they only borrowed it. And one day, when you are strong enough to understand, you will reclaim it. Tears welled up in her eyes. The candle flame blurred behind the wetness. She pressed the paper to her heart as a sob escaped her lips, not just from pain, but from revelation. For years, she had believed she was nothing more than a servant's shadow. But now, the truth screamed in her chest: she was not a maid. She was the rightful heir. The shock left her trembling. The rain outside had turned into a full storm, as if the heavens themselves were echoing her father's fury. Alisha replayed every cruel word Rose had ever said to her, every smirk Amanda threw her way, every chore, every humiliation. They had stolen not only her inheritance, but her identity, her entire life. But something within her had changed. She wiped her tears, her gaze hardening with resolve. "You took everything from him," she whispered, "but you won't take me." From that night forward, Alisha was no longer the timid girl who cleaned floors and served at dinners. She became a quiet storm, watching, listening, remembering. She spent her days in silence, her head bowed as usual, but her mind was awake for the first time. She studied the Moors' movements, their schedules, their weaknesses. At night, when everyone slept, she began to write. Her small wooden desk became her war table. Under the flicker of candlelight, she copied out the letters from the envelope, compared dates, traced names, and started mapping the network of people her father had once trusted. There was a man named Harold Finch, her father's former accountant. She found his name mentioned in one of the old company letters. Another name, Michael Trent, was listed as a witness on one of the share certificates. Both had disappeared from the business world shortly after Edmund's death. Coincidence? Alisha didn't believe in coincidences anymore. Each night, she pieced together fragments of a puzzle too big for her to fully understand, but her instincts were sharp. Every discovery fed the fire that was growing inside her. The maid who had been trained to obey was learning how to strike back, not with rage, but with precision. Weeks turned into months. Alisha began using her small savings, tips from kind guests and hidden coins she had collected, to make quiet inquiries. A friendly delivery man helped her send letters under another name. She posed as a journalist researching E&M Holdings. Slowly, replies began to come in. Some were useless, but one stood out, a short note from an unknown sender. "Your father was betrayed. John forged the transfer documents. Follow the trail to Harper Law Firm. They handled everything." Her hands shook as she read it. The truth was coming to light. Every night after that, she returned to the diary, reading her father's words as if they were instructions written just for her. When they rise too high on stolen ground, their own weight will bring them down. Those words became her mantra. By day, Alisha continued to play her role. She still bowed when Rose walked by, still answered Amanda's calls with a soft "yes, ma'am." But every yes carried a promise. Every chore she completed brought her one step closer to freedom. Sometimes she would catch John watching her, those cold, calculating eyes. Perhaps he saw something shifting in her, though he couldn't name it. The girl he once thought of as weak had learned to hide her strength behind a mask of obedience. Then came the night that changed everything again. While dusting John's study, Alisha noticed an old safe tucked behind a painting. Her heart skipped. She had seen him open it before, quickly, discreetly. The code, she had memorized it without meaning to. Years of watching had turned her into an observer, a silent predator waiting for her moment. That night, when the Moors slept, she crept into the office, her footsteps silent as the wind. Her fingers dialed the code, 1-9-6-8, the year the company was founded. The lock clicked. Inside were stacks of legal papers, bank statements, and contracts, some with Edmund's signature. Her father's name, copied and forged. She took photos with a small disposable camera she'd kept hidden for years. Every click of the shutter felt like justice whispering her name. When she returned to her room, she placed the diary beside her and stared into the candle flame. "You were right, Daddy," she said softly. "They took everything. But I'll take it back." Outside, the rain had stopped. The night was silent again, but no longer peaceful. Something powerful had awakened inside her, a quiet, relentless determination. The next morning, as the first light filtered through the mansion windows, Alisha walked down the hallway with her head held slightly higher. Rose didn't notice, Amanda didn't care, and John didn't suspect, but the girl who once served them had crossed a line that could never be undone. The whispers of the past had spoken, and Alisha was ready to listen. The Moore mansion shimmered that night like a temple of gold. Laughter poured through its grand hallways, the kind of laughter that came only from people who believed the world belonged to them. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead, champagne sparkled in tall glasses, and the music of violins danced beneath the murmurs of wealth and pride. It was a night of celebration, another successful deal, as John Moore called it. Guests in tailored suits and glittering gowns filled the room, toasting to the empire that had once belonged to another man, Edmund Williams, Alisha's father. The irony was cruel. Alisha moved quietly among them, a tray balanced perfectly in her hands. Years of servitude had trained her movements to perfection, invisible, efficient, silent. Her black uniform blended into the shadows of the marble pillars. To the Moores and their guests, she was part of the decor, nothing more than background to their triumph. But inside her, something burned. She could feel it with every sneer Amanda threw at her, every false smile Rose flashed when someone praised her charitable nature. Each laugh, each toast to success, felt like a dagger twisting deeper into her chest. But she had learned to hide the pain well. Tonight, though, something in the air felt different. As she moved through the hall, her eyes briefly met John's. He looked older now, his once confident smile hardened by years of greed. The man who had stolen her father's empire stood at the center of the celebration, wearing the charm of a hero. For a moment, Alisha wondered if he even remembered the promises he had once made to Edmund, the brotherhood, the partnership, the shared dreams. But she knew better. Men like John Moore didn't remember their sins, they buried them beneath luxury. Rose's laughter cut through the music like a blade. She stood at the head of the table, a glass raised high. "To my husband," she said proudly, "the man who built an empire with his brilliance and vision." Applause filled the room. Alicia's fingers tightened around the tray. Her father's empire. His name erased. His dream stolen. She forced her gaze downward, breathing through the ache in her chest. Then it happened. As she turned to refill a guest's glass, her hand brushed against another's elbow. The tray wobbled. One crystal flute tipped over, shattering against the marble floor. The sound echoed like thunder in the silence that followed. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. The hall froze. And at the center of it all, Alisha stood, a single shard of glass glinting at her feet, her hands trembling slightly as the liquid spread across the floor like spilled gold. Rose's eyes narrowed. "Of course," she hissed, stepping forward. It had to be her. A few guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. Others watched with quiet amusement, sensing drama. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Alisha began softly, bending down to gather the pieces. But Rose wasn't done. "Sorry? You're always sorry, aren't you?" Her voice rose, echoing through the grand hall. "Do you know how much that glass costs? Of course you don't. You wouldn't understand value if it slapped you across that pretty little face." Alicia's cheeks burned. The humiliation was sharp, familiar, but this time it carried a different weight. She could feel every eye in the room on her, not just pitying, but judging, enjoying. Rose stepped closer, her heels clicking against the marble. "You should be grateful we even let you stay here. Feeding you. Giving you a roof over your head." Her lips curled into a cruel smile. "Without us, you'd be on the streets, cleaning gutters instead of floors." A nervous chuckle rippled through the guests. Amanda grinned, whispering something that made her friends laugh louder. Alicia's fingers clenched around the broken shards. The sting of the glass cut into her skin, but she didn't flinch. She stared down at her reflection in the glossy floor, a maid's uniform, trembling hands, and eyes full of fire. Rose leaned in, lowering her voice so only Alisha could hear, though her tone still dripped with venom. "Remember your place, girl. You're nothing but a servant." Something inside Alisha snapped. For years, she had swallowed her pride, silenced her truth, and carried the weight of her father's stolen legacy. But that moment, that single public humiliation, lit a flame that no amount of wealth or power could ever extinguish. Slowly, she rose to her feet. Her hands still bled, but she no longer felt the pain. The music had stopped, the guests watching as if they sensed something shifting, an invisible force gathering in the air. Alisha looked straight at Rose, her voice calm, her gaze unwavering. "You think I'm nothing," she said softly, "but you're wrong. Rose blinked, taken aback. Excuse me. Alicia's voice grew stronger. I've lived under this roof all my life. I've served your food, cleaned your mess, endured your cruelty, but you made one mistake. She paused, her words slicing through the silence like thunder after lightning. You thought I'd always stay beneath you. A murmur rippled through the guests. John's expression hardened. That's enough, Alisha, he said, his voice sharp warning. But she didn't stop. Her tears shimmered, catching the chandelier's light as she looked around the room, at every person who had laughed at her, pitted her, ignored her. You took everything from my father, she whispered, her voice trembling with fury and truth. You stole his empire, his dream, his name. And now you think you can break me too. Rose took a step back, her smile faltering. What are you talking about? Alicia's eyes locked onto hers. I'm talking about justice. Her tone was no longer that of a maid, it was the voice of a woman reclaiming her identity. I will take everything from you. The words landed like an explosion. The entire room fell silent. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then laughter erupted. Loud, mocking laughter. The guests roared as if they'd heard the best joke of the night. Rose joined them, clutching her pearls. Oh, listen to her. Our little maid has delusions of grandeur. But Alisha didn't flinch. She stood tall, eyes glistening not from shame but from conviction. In that instant, she didn't see the chandeliers or the fine clothes or the mocking faces. She saw her father, Edmund Williams, smiling in her memory, proud and strong. Their laughter couldn't drown out the truth that had already awakened inside her. Amanda whispered to her mother, she's lost her mind. Maybe she had. Or maybe, for the first time in her life, she had finally found it. As she turned to leave the hall, Rose called after her, voice dripping with contempt. You'll regret those words, Alisha. Without looking back, Alisha replied, her tone calm, steady, unshakable. No. You will. The grand doors closed behind her, leaving behind the echo of laughter, but beneath that laughter, fear had already begun to stir. Because none of them knew that the girl they mocked that night would soon become the storm that tore their world apart. If you were in Alicia's place, humiliated, surrounded by those who betrayed your blood, what would you do? Would you fight back or walk away? Tell us in the comments below. Dawn broke over the Moore estate like a silent judgment. The first rays of sunlight crept through the mansion's tall windows, touching the marble floors and gold-framed portraits that once symbolized power and victory. But on this morning, the light felt harsh, exposing, unforgiving. It was as if the house itself knew that its reign was over. Inside, chaos had replaced elegance. The ringing of phones shattered the quiet, urgent voices echoing through the halls. Servants whispered nervously, unsure whether to stay or flee. In John Moore's study, the walls that once displayed his pride, awards, stock certificates, framed photographs of business triumphs, now seemed to close in on him. He stood behind his desk, his face pale and drenched with sweat, as he barked into the phone. What do you mean the accounts are frozen? He shouted. This can't be happening. Check again. Every one of them. But the only response he got was static and the trembling voice of his lawyer. Sir, the federal investigation, it's everywhere. The shares, the offshore funds, even the company assets, they've all been flagged. John slammed his fist against the desk. No, damn it. That's impossible. Someone did this. Downstairs, Rose Moore sat on the staircase in her silk robe, clutching a glass of untouched wine. Her face was a mask of disbelief, the lines of arrogance carved deep into her features. Just yesterday, she had been laughing at Alisha, mocking her in front of guests. Today, her hands trembled as message after message flashed across her phone. Bank notifications, alerts, news headlines. More industries under investigation. Massive corporate fraud exposed. Founder's true heir identified, Edmund Williams' daughter. Her heart stopped at the last headline. Amanda stumbled into the room, panic written across her face. Mom, they're saying we're broke. All the cards, they're declining. What's happening? Rose stared at her daughter, words catching in her throat. Someone's done this to us. But even as she said it, a memory flickered, a voice, trembling yet defiant, in front of their guests the night before. I will take everything from you. Rose's glass slipped from her hand, shattering against the steps. The sound echoed through the mansion like an omen. Upstairs, John tore through drawers, searching for documents, for control, for any piece of his empire still untouched. But every file he opened only deepened the horror: revoked accounts, terminated contracts, revoked licenses. Even the partners who once worshipped him had begun to turn away, their names disappearing one by one from his contacts list. When the door burst open, their financial advisor stood there, pale and stammering. "Sir, the government just froze your primary holdings. They traced back every acquisition from the last 15 years. There's evidence of forged documents, false transfers." John cut him off, shouting, "They can't prove anything." But deep down, he knew they could. He had built his kingdom on Edmund Williams's stolen foundation. And now, that foundation was collapsing beneath him. Across town, in a modest apartment overlooking the city, Alisha stood by the window, watching the sunrise. Her laptop glowed faintly on the table behind her, the same one she had used for months, collecting evidence, connecting dots, working with Edmund's former associates who still remembered the truth. The people John had ruined were the same people who now helped her restore justice. She hadn't done it for revenge. At least, that's what she told herself. But when she saw the breaking news on her screen, more empire crumbles amid scandal, a quiet satisfaction filled her chest. Not joy. Not triumph. Just peace. Her father's name was being spoken again, not as a forgotten partner, but as the true founder of the company that once bore his vision. His dream, twisted by greed, was finally free of the men who corrupted it. She remembered his words from the letter she found inside the diary: "When they rise too high on stolen ground, their own weight will bring them down." He had been right. Back at the mansion, John was unraveling. He had always been a man of control, the kind who could silence anyone with a phone call, fix any problem with a check. But now, every number he dialed led to voicemail, every ally pretended not to know him. "This isn't over," he roared, slamming his phone against the wall. Rose, sitting in the corner of the study, laughed bitterly. "It already is," she said softly. "Look at us, John. Look at what we've become." He turned on her, rage twisting his face. "You think I wanted this? You think I planned for it to end like this? We had everything." "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We had his everything. And now we have nothing." Silence followed, heavy and final. By afternoon, reporters had gathered outside the estate gates. Cameras flashed, drones hovered, and the same society that once praised the Moores now feasted on their downfall. John refused to step outside, hiding behind drawn curtains. Amanda cried in her room, surrounded by designer dresses she could no longer afford. Rose wandered the halls like a ghost, her bare feet echoing against the marble that once gleamed beneath Alicia's hands. She thought of the years spent looking down on the girl who had lived under her roof, the girl she had mocked, broken, enslaved. She thought of her words at the dinner: "You're nothing but a servant." Now she understood what true servitude felt like, being enslaved to fear, to guilt, to loss. As the sun set, the once mighty Moore estate fell silent. The power was gone. The fortune was gone. The illusion was gone. And somewhere in that silence, Alisha appeared at the gates. She didn't go inside. She didn't need to. Through the bars, she could see Rose sitting on the steps, her head in her hands. For a moment, pity flickered in Alicia's heart, but only for a moment. She thought of her father dying alone, of the years stolen from her, of the girl who scrubbed floors for people who had taken everything from her bloodline. She turned away. Justice had already been served. There was nothing more to take. As night fell, the last lights in the Moore mansion went out, swallowed by darkness. The empire that once stood as a monument to greed had turned to dust. And Alisha, the maid they had mocked, the orphan they had enslaved, walked into the night free. If you had the power to destroy those who destroyed your family, would you take revenge, or show mercy? Tell us in the comments below. The morning after the Moore's collapse, the mansion stood under a different kind of light. It wasn't the warm golden glow of celebration, but the pale, unforgiving light of exposure. Reporters swarmed the front gates, their cameras flashing like restless lightning. Microphones waved in the air, each voice echoing the same question. Is it true that Edmund Williams was the real founder? What role did John Moore play in the fraud? And who is Alisha Williams? The truth, long buried under greed, lies, and silence, had finally clawed its way to the surface. Inside, the once pristine estate looked nothing like the fortress of pride it had been. Curtains were half-drawn, champagne glasses left half-empty from the party that had ended in humiliation. The walls, which once echoed with laughter, now seemed to mourn. And amid the broken splendor, Alisha Williams, the woman they once called a maid, stood in quiet reflection. She walked slowly through the grand hall, her footsteps soft but steady. Every corner held a memory. There by the staircase, she once scrubbed floors while Rose scolded her for missing a spot. By the dining table, she had endured laughter that pierced deeper than any insult. The marble beneath her feet had known her tears, but not anymore. Today, she was not the maid. She was the heir. A news crew caught sight of her through the open doors. "That's her," someone whispered. "That's Edmund Williams' daughter." Cameras clicked in rapid succession, flashes bouncing off her calm expression. Reporters called out questions, dozens of them, desperate, chaotic, but Alisha didn't stop to answer. Her silence was louder than any statement. Just hours earlier, the media had received official confirmation from the courts. Edmund Williams was the legal founder and majority shareholder of E&M Holdings. The Moore's forged documents had been traced, invalidated, and reversed. The empire, what little remained of it, was now in the hands of its rightful owner, Edmund's daughter. When the news broke, the world watched in stunned disbelief. The Moores, once paragons of high society, had fallen in disgrace, their name now synonymous with fraud. And the girl they had called the help? She was the one they had wronged all along. Alisha paused before a tall mirror framed in gold. She stared at her reflection, the same reflection that had once tormented her. Years ago, that mirror had shown her a maid, a servant, a nobody. Now, it showed her a woman shaped by endurance, truth, and justice. Behind her, Amanda appeared at the edge of the hall. Gone were the designer dresses and smug expressions. Her eyes were swollen from tears, her voice barely a whisper. "Alisha." Alisha turned slowly. The sight of Amanda, broken, uncertain, stirred something unexpected in her. Once, she had dreamed of this moment, imagined what it would feel like to see Amanda humbled. But now, standing before her, she felt no triumph, no joy. Only understanding. Amanda took a hesitant step forward. "I didn't know," she said, her voice trembling. "Mother and father never told me. I swear I didn't know who you were." For a long moment, Alisha said nothing. The weight of years, of pain, servitude, betrayal, hung heavy in the air between them. Finally, she spoke, her voice calm but firm. "You didn't need to know who I was to treat me like a human being." Amanda lowered her gaze, unable to meet Alicia's eyes. Shame said what words could not. At the far end of the hall, Rose appeared too, her once flawless posture slumped, her eyes dull. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. For the first time, Rose Moore, the woman who had ruled this mansion with venom, was speechless before the girl she had enslaved. Alisha looked at her, not with hatred, but with the quiet composure of someone who had already won her battle. "I'm not here to destroy you," Alisha said softly. "That's already been done by your own hands." Rose flinched. Alisha turned away, letting her gaze sweep across the mansion one last time. The grand staircase, the glittering chandeliers, the velvet curtains, all of it had been built with stolen dreams. None of it belonged to her heart. She walked toward the doors as the morning sun began to spill through, bathing the marble floors in gold. Outside, the reporters waited, but their shouts grew faint behind her. Each step she took felt lighter, freer. As she crossed the threshold, she could almost hear her father's voice in the wind, warm, proud, at peace. "Justice isn't about revenge, my little one. It's about restoration." She smiled faintly, tears glistening in her eyes. When she reached the gates, the cameras flashed again, but this time, she didn't shy away. The world needed to see her, not as a victim, not as a servant, but as the daughter of Edmund Williams, the man whose truth had outlived every lie. Behind her, the mansion loomed, silent and hollow. The empire that had been built on betrayal had fallen, and its walls now stood as monuments to greed's inevitable end. Alisha didn't look back. She had no reason to. Everything that mattered, her father's name, her dignity, her peace, was no longer trapped inside that house. She stepped into the light, the sunrise washing over her face, warm and gentle. For the first time in her life, Alisha Williams wasn't walking away from something, she was walking toward her own beginning. Justice had been served. And with it, the silence that followed was not one of defeat, but of peace, the kind her father had been denied, but she had finally reclaimed. Months had passed since the fall of the Moors, yet the echo of that final reckoning still lingered in whispers across the city. The empire once built on deceit was now dust, but from that dust, something beautiful had risen, something her father would have been proud of. The morning sun bathed the streets in soft gold as Alisha stepped out of her car and stood before a tall glass building shimmering with new life. Above its doors gleamed a simple yet powerful name, the Edmonds Foundation. Her breath caught for a moment. To the world, it was just another charity organization, a new project by a newly revealed heiress. But to Alisha, it was far more. It was her father's dream, reborn. The building was everything the Moore mansion had never been, warm, open, alive. Instead of marble floors and crystal chandeliers, there were murals painted by children, colorful ribbons fluttering in the breeze, and laughter echoing from the courtyard. Dozens of little girls played there, their joy unrestrained, their innocence untouched by the cruelty of the world. Alisha smiled as she watched them. Some were orphans, others were children of single mothers who had found refuge here. They ran barefoot through the grass, chasing bubbles and sunlight, their giggles carrying through the air like music. It was in moments like this that Alisha truly understood what victory meant. Not revenge. Not wealth. But restoration, the kind of peace that comes when pain finally blooms into purpose. Inside, the building was filled with warmth and light. Volunteers bustled about, arranging art supplies, sorting books, preparing breakfast for the children. On the far wall of the main lobby hung a large framed portrait, her father, Edmund Williams, smiling in his favorite navy suit. The same photo she had once clutched in tears now watched over a space filled with hope. Alisha walked toward it slowly, her heels clicking softly against the tiled floor. She paused before the portrait, her reflection merging with his. "We did it, Daddy," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Your dream didn't die. It just waited for the right time to be reborn." For a long while she stood there, not as the woman who had lost everything, but as the daughter who had reclaimed her name. Her assistant, a kind middle-aged woman named Ruth, approached with a clipboard. "Miss Williams, the girls are ready for you," she said, her eyes kind. "They want to hear your story." Alisha turned, smiling softly. "Not my story," she said. "Our story." She stepped into the courtyard where the children had gathered beneath the shade of a wide oak tree. The laughter quieted as they saw her, their small faces looking up in admiration. Some of the younger ones still couldn't believe that the woman who founded their home came from the same kind of pain they knew. Alisha knelt so she could meet their eyes. "Once upon a time," she began, "there was a little girl who thought she didn't belong anywhere. She worked hard, she cried often, and she dreamed of freedom. But one day, she learned something powerful, that no one can steal what's meant for you. They can delay it, they can bury it, but they can't destroy it." The children listened, their eyes wide. "She grew up," Alisha continued, "and she found her strength. And when she did, she made a promise, that no other little girl would ever have to feel as lost as she once did. That promise," she said, looking around, "is all of you." Applause rippled softly from the staff nearby. Some of the older women, single mothers who had been given jobs and shelter through the foundation, wiped away tears. As Alisha stood again, a breeze passed through the courtyard, fluttering the foundation's flag overhead. The sunlight hit the building's glass facade, reflecting the name Edmonds Foundation like a blessing from heaven itself. In that light, Alisha felt her father's presence, not as a shadow of loss, but as a guiding warmth. She could almost hear his voice, steady and proud. "You've built something worth more than wealth, my daughter. You've built a legacy." She smiled through her tears, watching the children run again, their laughter filling the air. For years, she had been trapped in a mansion built on lies. Now, she stood in a home built on truth. The woman they once called the Maid was now the one building futures, not for power, not for glory, but for love. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Alisha turned back toward the building, her father's name gleaming above the doors, and whispered softly, "This is your empire now, Daddy. Not of steel and glass, but of hearts and hope." And with that, she walked inside, ready to begin her next chapter. A new dawn had truly begun. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.